Though you will see click to continue and replay buttons in this video, these features are not supported by this format. You may want to pause the video when you see these buttons. If you want these features and the supplemental slides and files that correspond to the video, then enroll in the course at biztricks.us. In order to get started in VBA, we need to add the Developer tab to the menu. Go to File, Options, Customize ribbon, select Developer, click OK. Yeah, we did that with the shortcut keys. We're not here to teach shortcut keys in this course because that's a module we cover in our Excel course entitled Get Off the Mouse. I use the mouse only when it's absolutely necessary. I take saving time seriously, and using the mouse in Excel is almost always a waste of time. Now that the Developer tab is added to the ribbon, we'll take the time to orient ourselves around these new commands. We'll hit these topics again throughout the course, so don't worry about memorizing everything. Plus, you have the reference slides to help you out. We focus solely on the code group in this course. There's not a need to focus on other groups aside from the insert command in the controls group, but that's for another course. Let's work counterclockwise, starting with Visual Basic. Visual Basic will launch the coding editor. We'll snap these windows side by side because it will be helpful to see both the Excel and Visual Basic windows at the same time. If you have two monitors, then put each on their own monitor. You see in the upper left corner that this is the window for Visual Basic for applications. This window may also be referred to as the Visual Basic Editor, or VBE. So when you hear VBA, Visual Basic, or VBE, then this is generally what people are referring to. Visual Basic, or VB.NET, is actually an object-oriented language. Excel Visual Basic is not an object-oriented language. Both Visual Basic and Excel Visual Basic look and feel the same, but they're very different. This is why we generally preface VBA with Excel to avoid any confusion. However, we'll use these two terms interchangeably, VBA and Excel VBA. We'll come back to this window in a bit. Launch Macro Security. Trust Center opens. Excel calls out that enabling VBA macros is potentially dangerous. For example, you can create code to run once a file opens, and that code could be malicious. We recommend that you disable VBA macros with notification. Your organization may block you from changing this setting, so let's hope they take the same approach. Second, though rare, it is possible to write code for the VBA environment, not just the Excel environment. This is an advanced topic, but that's what trusting access to the VBA project object module will do for you. We don't think use relative references is needed. If you want to dive into this, then open Options, navigate to Formulas, check R1C1 reference style, and have at it. Make all the formulas you want using that style. Record Macro. This will launch the Record Macro dialog box where you can name your macro, set a shortcut key for the macro, store the macro in a specific location, and add a description. We advise that you not change these settings. The macro recorder does a good job at recording the steps you take in Excel, but its code is not optimized, and there are things it cannot record. It's a great tool I frequently use for quickly obtaining lines of code, but I wouldn't trust it as production-ready code. Said another way, use the macro recorder to copy-paste code and then delete the recorded macro when you're done. Clicking OK will start the recorder. You can see Excel added a modules folder. If we navigate there, then we can watch the macro work as we operate in Excel. Unfortunately, you can't get around R1C1 notation in the recorder formulas, but using .formula or .formula2 instead of .formula R1C1 will accept A1 notation. Stop the macro recorder. Formula 2 was implemented with the new dynamic array formulas that support SPIL functionality. So use .formula2 where necessary. Formula is still available for backward compatibility. The apostrophe is a comment character. The program will ignore all these lines. Code is processed one line at a time, so these two lines are executed separately. VBA is procedural, meaning it's evaluated in the order in which it is written. Macros launches the macro dialog box. If you have any public macros, such as the one that was just recorded, then you'll see it listed here. You can run the macro, debug the macro by stepping into it, edit the macro, meaning the Visual Basic window will open and the cursor will be placed on that macro, delete the macro, or change the macro's options. Our recorded macro is selected because it's the top entry in the list. Let's click Edit. This is our coding environment. The File menu is at the top. The toolbars are underneath the File menu. Both the Project Explorer and Properties windows should be preloaded. If not, Alt-VP or Control-R to open the Project Explorer. The Project Explorer is structured like File Explorer. Each file or project is bold. Within a project, you have objects, such as the worksheets within a file and the This Workbook object. The macro recorder created a module for us, so the project is pre-populated with that module. A module is a general code file. You can also add another module, user form, or class module. These are separate code files. Procedure helps you insert sub-procedures, functions, and properties. These may be scoped as public or private, and static variables are possible. We explain this in more depth in the course. So let's just create my first macro. We write code or syntax in this window. There is an object dropdown and a declarations dropdown. The values in the dropdown change based on whether you are coding in a module, user form, class, or other object. Alt-VW or F4 to open the Properties window. This has properties for your selected object, such as the Autosave On property. Go ahead, change that from false to true, or true to false. Alt-VI or Control-G to open the immediate window. We can ask questions here. We can also print information to this window with debug.print. Other useful windows are locals and watches. We see these two windows in a later lesson. The Edit menu has a list of commands that should look familiar. The View menu has a list of windows and commands to navigate to code locations. The disabled commands apply to user forms and the call stack. The call stack is the sequence in which code is called. Again, we'll see this later. We saw insert already. Format applies to user forms. Debug pertains to how we run our code. For example, we can insert breakpoints, step through the code one line at a time, or run code to the cursor. Run gives us options for executing our code. Execute at full speed, stop execution, or interrupt execution. Design mode is for user forms. Tools has references, which are ways to access code components from other applications. Macros, which loads the same macro dialog box we saw earlier. Project properties, which allow you to create things like help files for your code or password protect your projects. Add digital certificates, which help you know whether your workbook has been modified since you signed it, and options. Within options, you need to check Require Variable Declaration. This adds the option explicit keywords at the top of your code window and forces you to declare variables before they can be used in the code. Always enable Require Variable Declaration. The other default settings are fine, but feel free to have a look around. Move over add-ins, unless you have VBA add-ins. Window lets you organize code windows accordingly. Help is, well, help. Don't write off the help files on Microsoft's pages, though, because they're indeed very helpful.